Welcome to Stay a While, the podcast that's virtual soul food for your ears. I am your host, Tommi Vincent, and each week we break bread with bold, passionate women who have faced the impossible and are still standing to share their testimonies. Make yourself at home and stay a while. Hey everyone, it's Tommi Vincent, your host of Stay a While podcast, and joining us today at the Stay a While table, we have Sharisse Kimbro. Sharisse is a mission-driven leader currently serving as the program officer at the Allstate Foundation. Sharisse is also an author, and we could not be more delighted to have her at the table. I am looking forward to our conversation, Sharisse, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor and a privilege for me to be here today. So I'm really excited too.
So before we get down into our conversation, I have a simple question for you. Who is Sharisse Kimbro?
Sharisse Kimbro is a mother, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a leader, a sensitive soul, and a big heart.
Okay, so you went into a lot of what Sharisse does, like the roles that Sharisse plays.
Yes.
Which we do. That
Yes.
is very common as women. We put those things forward because we often serve in so many capacities for so many different people.
Yeah.
But if we were to take all of that away, we know you're a sensitive soul. Who is Sharisse?
I guess it's an interesting question. I mean, it's an interesting way to think about oneself, right? Because we do think about it in these roles. And I think when I think about myself, it's in the context of relationship to those roles. But I think who I am as a person, I really do feel like my sensitivity is a big part of who I am as a person. I'm a thoughtful, creative person who is really driven from like a heart-centered place. And that's kind of been a motivator for me in how I have guided my career, how I've guided my relationships, how I approach the world. And so I would say I'm a woman of with a big heart, with great integrity. I try to operate in, and I try to always operate in a spirit of excellence. So I think those are the things I think that make me me. And creativity, I think, and thoughtfulness are also big components, I think, of who I am.
When I was just doing some of my research on you, and one of the things that I thought was really cool and also just a great fact about you is how you published your first book with the help of your mother at the age of 7 years old, your book of poetry, The Best of Me.
Yes. Oh, you dug
Now,
deep.
Yeah.
You wasn't playing. You went back.
Well, I was curious about your book that you have, the novel that you wrote, Beyond the Broken. And so in that process of learning more about that book, I saw that fact about you, and I thought at 7 years old, being able to recognize this point of creativity within you and the ability to use words, to tell stories, to paint pictures is pretty fascinating to me. I think about now I don't have 7-year-old children. All of my children are grown, but I have grandchildren. And just for your mom to be that insightful and that encouraging to say, no, you know what, we're going to take this book and we're going to publish it. I know that was a while ago, but do you remember what that felt like, having a book published at 7 years old?
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting, Tommy, because the poetry, like, so many things, the poetry came really out of a time in my little 7-year-old life that was really full of a lot of pain. My parents had gotten divorced when I was 7. And so writing really became my refuge, and that was really my safe place. And so that was my outlet, my expression. I did poetry. I used to write plays. I used to write stories. And so I think for me, I remember feeling like this was an affirmation of this gift that I had, in terms of, even like you said, having the sense or the wherewithal or the idea to start writing these poems. And that she kind of took what was a painful thing and made it into something beautiful, right? So she took the pain that was coming out in the poetry that I was writing and then packaged it and then had it published. And remember, we had a book party at my house and I was signing books for people in a little dress. And but so it was really like a very powerful affirmation, I think, of my gift at that age, and just feeling like, oh, wow, like this is not a bad thing. I think I associated it in some ways with a lot of uh, hurt and pain. And so to kind of, making like, lemonade out of lemon, so to speak. I think that's kind of really what it felt like to me at that age. So it was pretty, unusual, I think, and just special and just kind of, they're really affirmational, like I said, from my mom to do that for me way back then.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree that it had to be powerful, and leave such a lasting memory
Hmm.
for yourself. And then your book, your
Hmm.
fictional novel, Beyond the
Hmm.
Broken, it tells the story of five women who don't get the life that they planned for.
Hmm.
And that made me think about my own life and a lot of the other women that I am in relationship with, how we have these plans for life,
Yeah.
and life, has a lot of twists and turns. And so sometimes those plans don't turn out the way that we hope they would.
Yeah.
In your time of living, when your plans don't go as you plan, how do you continue to forge ahead and the take those lemons and create lemonade?
Yeah, and I think, that's where the title comes from, Beyond the Broken, like the broken dreams, the broken promises, the broken hopes. And how do you live beyond that? And what lies beyond that for people? And I think there's just, I think for me, Tommy, just an internal fortitude and tenacity to keep going. I have a strong faith life, and that also keeps me going. Even in times when I don't know how I've been able to keep going, I somehow still manage to still be here, after going through lots of different, like really difficult and traumatic experiences. And I think there's just a sense around just not giving up, just like giving up isn't really an option. And so you just kind of taking like the next step and one more step and one more step and really kind of approaching it on a daily basis, sometimes an hourly basis, sometimes a minute by minute basis. But there is a opportunity also always when things don't go as planned to have a hope for a better plan,
Mm-hmm.
have a hope for a different plan, have a hope for finding the goodness out of even really bad things. And even though not to do like a toxic positivity kind of spread over difficult things, but I think there are ways in which you can look back in different moments and see how you've grown as a person as a result of the things you've gone through. You can see how you've gotten strong, we've gotten wise, you've gotten better. And even for those things, sometimes we can't explain some things. We can't explain why they turn out the way they do. And they are so hurtful and so terrible and so painful that there is no kind of tidy bow to put on it. But there is, I think, also value in being able to navigate and live in that gray space when you don't know why things have happened. They've been maybe some really horrible things, but yet you are still standing. And so then it's an opportunity, I think, to turn inward and really explore, well, why am I still here? What is there yet left for me to do that I've kind of endured all that and I'm still kind of in my right mind, in my right healthy body? Like, okay, this must be for a reason. And then, kind of trying to find some meaning in that. And I do think also just having the opportunity to share with others and to help and assist other people who may be going through the same thing or who will go through the same thing is another real catalyst for me, because I feel like I didn't go through all that just for myself, or I didn't go through all
Mm-hmm.
that just for nothing. So if I can help somebody else by telling my story, by them understanding kind of what my journey has been, then that's for the benefit as well. So I think, those are some of the things and tools and strategies I think about when I'm kind of managing through, a life that is very different than what I planned. So it's fictional in the book, but it's also, like you said, very real in different areas of my life, very real. And a lot of women that I know that, we have these, kind of laid out schedules and plans for our lives. And then either at different points along the way, it doesn't work out the way we planned, either by us not being able to attain those things we thought we wanted, or by getting the things we thought we wanted and then having them not be as satisfying or the end all be all that we thought they would be, to our lives. And then how do we kind of wrestle in that disconnection? So,
The part about, when we these spaces in life where we feel like we're broken.
hmm.
And I know for myself, I've had some moments in my life that I literally felt like I was broken.
Hmm.
And as I got older, what I was able to see was how those circumstances, how those hard experiences really did help me to become the woman I am today. And
Hmm.
so I recognize that in those broken pieces now give me something to offer to share. It's those pieces that I can offer up to other women, and as they're navigating life and having their own experiences, that I'm able to contribute by sharing my story. And not that I was able to navigate it the right way or my way is the way. It's just, I believe, important for other people to understand you're not the only one,
Yep.
and that you too can make it,
Yep.
and your making it may look different than my making it. However, I'm still standing, and I'm using those circumstances. I'm using those moments in my life to really allow me to be the woman that I am today. So the title of the book, I'm like, okay, now I got to get the book, because it's one of those things where when you have an opportunity to look into the lives of other women, especially, it allows for you to see yourself. While our stories may be different, we do have a lot of similar experiences. And it is always helpful, especially if you didn't come from a family where there were other women, older women, more seasoned women sharing life. Having the opportunity to get those stories from other women is really critical for me, especially in this season of my life, because I didn't get that, where I had a lot of older women sharing with me their experiences.
Yeah, Tom, I definitely agree with that. And I think, for me, when I wrote the book, one of the reasons I wrote it, and it is, people always say, who is it in your life, and who are you? But it is fictional. But of course, you draw upon your own real life experiences. But also, I really wanted to say and depict some of those things that when I wrote it, it's been a while that it's been out, over 10 years, but that it's the things that we don't talk about, the things that sometimes aren't shared, those hard experiences that sometimes people don't feel comfortable sharing because for that very reason, like you mentioned, I didn't want people and women to feel like they were alone in their feelings. This book talks about how hard motherhood can be for some women. It talks about, infidelity. It talks about, infertility. It talks about a lot of real life things that a lot of people go through, but we go through in silence. We go through in solitude. And I think that is really what is so difficult and so important, like you said about the sharing, in terms of sharing your story helps set somebody else free. It helps show, like you said, somebody else, you can do it too. If I'm here, you can be here. And it may look different. The path may not be like the same exact steps, but just by example and by sharing. But I think and I think it's a little bit, better now that people feel more comfortable in some ways, but there still is so much, um, shame and so much guardedness that sometimes still is pervasive among women, especially, in the Black community too. I feel like particularly
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there's certain things we just don't talk about, certain things we still just don't say. And I think we have to say those things so we can free ourselves and then free somebody else. And I think that is the role as I've gotten older too, to really try to share and use my experiences so other people and younger folks don't have to go through the same things I went through because I've gone through them, And so I think that's really important to have that multi-generational. And I think a lot of us don't have, didn't grow up around in environments with women where things were shared. I mean, we certainly know that
Mm-hmm.
people had experiences, but I don't necessarily know all of what those experiences were, right? And so I see the evidence of them having endured what I know was not an easy life just from the fact of the times in which they lived, but like the mechanics and the details around that sometimes aren't always passed down, from generation to generation. So I think it's a really important thing.
You have extensive experience in as a mission driven leader.
Mhm.
Can you help us understand what is a mission driven
Mhm.
leader, and how does that show up in your work?
For me, what is most important has always been, in whatever role I was in, what was the reason, what was the why, what was the mission. And so, whether I was in corporate America, whether I was in public service, whether I was in philanthropy, that why, that mission was always the thing that drove me. And so knowing that really helps me to frame the decisions that I made, the way that I manage the team, the way that I lead work, because I'm always focused on and always come back to the why. I always come back to what that mission is. And I think when I've been in organizations where the mission was ultimately to like make money, I was like, okay, this doesn't really align with what my mission is, what my personal values are. So then I'm going to have to shift to some place where the mission was something different. So that is kind of what guided me along my career path, really working to be in spaces where I could help people, I could make a difference in people's lives, where I could um, do work that had an impact. That was always very, very important to me. So my path has kind of taken me in lots of different directions to try to achieve that in different spaces. And I think where I've landed, it took a while. I guess the path, everybody's path and route is different. And I think when you are very focused in that way around kind of impacting people, changing lives, and helping people, it's not always as straightforward. I think the path of public service was one that did help. That's kind of more of a systems level, but then there's other work that I've done that was more like the direct kind of person-to-person service, and then now I'm able to direct resources and invest in organizations that really help. I know I'm saving lives every day in the work that I do because I work in the domestic violence space, investing in organizations that work in those spaces and partnering with those organizations that I know and I've seen the impact up close and I've experienced it. And so I just am grateful that I'm in this place now where I can be really connected to the why and the work are really close in. I don't have to like take a couple steps to get there. It's like it's right there together, which is a great kind of place for me to be at, to land. So it's a really good fit for me as a leader.
You talked about how there were opportunities that you've had along your journey where the values didn't line up with your values.
Yep.
One, what are those values, and how did you become so sure that this is what I stand for? And so if this isn't present, this is a no for me.
My values really are, integrity is very important to me. Being, without sounding corny, like a good person, like being on the people side, caring about people, that people really matter. And I think that, and people matter more than profit. People matter more than deliverables. And that's also, I think, for me, being like a mission-driven leader or a heart-centered leader, it's really about the people for me. And so when I was ever doing work that was really more disconnected from people, that made it hard for me. And so wherever I could make it about the people, I tried to always kind of make it about the people, but sometimes it just wasn't. And that's okay. That just didn't line up for me with what I wanted to do and what my focus was. So it really drove me. And so I've always really tried to be in spaces where the people mattered and where people. And so then when I kind of, like I said, quickly found that no, that wasn't the case or wasn't so forward in the thinking or the philosophy or the mission of the organization, then it's like, okay, I need to do something. And it sometimes can manifest also in the way that people in the organization are treated too, not only kind of what the business or the work of the organization, but how even people within the organization are treated too. Because I think sometimes organizations can espouse a certain or particular value, but then that value isn't embodied within itself. And so then that's a problem too, right? So we always want to make sure there's alignment between what you say you do, who you say you are, and who you actually are as an organization.
So you and I have crossed paths in the space of domestic violence with your work with the National Domestic Violence Hotline. You also are a part of the work with a friend of mine, Tony Porter, with A Call to Men.
Yep.
So you are very intentional about showing up and really, and when I say you, I know that you're with the Allstate Foundation, but you are able to make the relationships and to really be able to convey why this work is so important. Why is this space so important for you to have the Allstate Foundation show up and do the life-saving work like you talked about, to make sure that we are creating spaces where we are attributing to healthy relationships and putting an end to domestic violence?
For me, domestic violence is And the issue has always been something that's been really close to me in my own life and experience. And I think that when I think about how pervasive it is and how widespread it is, and still how it's kind of a hidden thing, it's something, again, that people don't always talk about. It's something people don't want to talk about. It's something that people would like to ignore, would like to think is private, but yet it kind of permeates every facet of life. I mean, it impacts workplaces, it impacts homelessness, domestic violence impacts community violence, it impacts so many different spaces. So I think it's just critical, really, that we kind of bring it out of the shadows, bring it into the light, and really empower those organizations that are doing good work, helping survivors on the front line, saving those lives, but also the ripple effect, right? That a lot of people who grow up in households where there was abuse often go on to become abusers themselves or cause harm with other people. We know about the economic impact of domestic violence on survivors, and that has long-term rippling effects. There's a high percentage of folks in correlation between those who perpetrate community violence and those who've experienced domestic violence. So there's just so many layers. And then the harm, to the women themselves, often are kids, or men also are impacted who experience domestic violence as well. So it's just so pervasive and it's just been so hidden. So I just really think it's important to be out front and really vocal about, one, raising awareness about the issue, because people can't fix what they don't know, and it kind of expanding people's understanding about what constitutes abuse, because people still often think of it as just like a bruise, a black eye, a broken limb, but it's so much more than that. It's emotional abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse, tech abuse. There's so many different ways that it can manifest. So it's important to just continue to raise awareness about all the different kinds of domestic violence, so then we can all work together to try to end it, right? And it involves everybody. It involves not just women. It also involves the men to come with us and join us in the efforts to end domestic violence and take accountability, but also do it in a loving way. It helps us, requires us to educate young people, like you said, about healthy relationships at a young age, so they don't get into, relationships that are damaging as they get older, and they can identify, those different components. So it's just so pervasive, but so fixable. I feel like, even though it's been around for a long time, it seems kind of like an intractable problem. But I just believe that people, once they know about it and learn about it and learn how to support people in it, right? Because some of it is too, you may not be experiencing it, but if it's 1 in 4 women, then we all know somebody who has. And then how do we support that other woman, And so I think that's all just so important. So I'm excited, and I really feel fortunate to be able to be in this space and do this work. And like you said, to do the life-saving work, so.
The work itself, when you're getting all of the information and learning the statistics, and that there's so much still to be done, right? We're making progress. And to me, that piece of it has to always be celebrated. And we always have to keep that in the forefront, because we can't get weary in doing well. We got to keep going, because every step forward is a step in its progress. It's also heavy work. And so you get a lot of information, you hear a lot of stories. How do you stay committed to the work and also take care of yourself so that the weight doesn't become unbearable?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's an important question for everybody in this work, right? And I'm a step or two removed from the direct line folks that are on the front lines doing things, those advocates that are day in, day out hearing it. And I think for me, it is a balance of holding, because hearing those stories and being rooted in the survivor experience is really important, I think, to have a trauma-informed lens. And as I make decisions, so I'm often will be in meetings, and I will make sure I bring a survivor voice into the room, or always bring forth a statistic, or just to ground people in why we're doing what we're doing. Even though it is hard to hear, but I also always tell people, but imagine how much harder it is to live through. So we are just hearing it. Someone has lived through this, right? So, and I'm learning, still growing in taking care of myself, taking time away, doing restorative things. There's some restorative practices that I do regularly, like yoga, and exercise is really important to me. Taking time away from work is one that I'm really growing into, because there is so much work to be done, right? And learning how to say no to some things, because you do feel like, oh, this is a really good thing. I really should go here. I really should go do that. But I can't. I'm only one person. I can't be everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I do have support in that. At work, where people will say, okay, Sharisse, you're doing like too much, you're doing a lot. And so but it's hard because the work is it's so important and so compelling. I feel like it's hard to say no to. So I'm still learning that. Honestly, I'm growing in that. But it's something that, and even self-care, things like getting massages and things. And I've learned those from a lot of my partners. A lot of my, nonprofit partners have really helped to influence me and impact me around doing these things regularly, right? Like it can't just be a one-off thing, and it can't be once you get to the point where you're feeling burned out. I mean, it's good to do it whenever, but optimally it would be so you don't get to that point. So doing things all along the way, and just and really just making sure that you are kind of having the download times and the times you can just relax and be still, are very important. And also just always, I try to always be grounded in like the gratitude when a survivor shares a story, when I just
Mm-hmm.
really like recognizing and holding that space sacred for him or her, because I know what that means. And so that also helps me to, like, it is a heavy story for me to hear, but again, they lived it, they experienced it. So how much more heavy is it for them to carry, and they're able to share, and what a gift that is for all of us. Like you said, back to the original point about the broken pieces and offering them to help others. And I know I've done enough of this work to know that whenever somebody shares a story, there are always multiple people that are impacted, that see something they didn't see, or understand something they didn't understand, or feel encouraged to go forward. And that's really kind of what it's all about. But the self-care piece is really, really important. And I'm growing into that.
You know where I am most impacted is in my parenting.
Mm.
One, as a survivor myself, and then, just with the information that I've
Mm-hmm.
acquired over the years, sometimes I show up in my parenting unfairly
Mm.
because my lens is hypersensitive, that I'm not taking into account of just young people growing up, young people learning life and navigating life. And so I find myself sometimes like, you need to telling myself, you need to chill out. Like, yes, I want to be strong in my convictions and I want them to have those same types of convictions, but I also have to just be mindful that there's a process that we all go through in life of growing up. That's normal. That, it's not anything, you know, it's nothing nefarious taking place here. This is just a young lady being a young lady, or a young man being a young man. And I have to always just remind myself of that. As the more entrenched I get into the work, I just have to just kind of remember, like, sometimes I just need to chill out. That's the bottom line. As a mom, I'm just like, okay, calm down.
My son just said the same thing to me the other day. He's like, sometimes, mom, you make things worse because you get so upset, you get so worked up about things. And I was like, really? But it's like, I can see the whole thing. And like you said, a lot of it is just like, he's like, mom, it's just like, it's not that big of a deal. You make everything such a big deal. And so I was like, wow, okay. Like you said, since, relax. They don't have to say that to me because that annoys me. They say, mom, just relax. But I do realize that sometimes I do need to just relax and understand that they have the tools to navigate through situations. And like you said, it's a part of just growing up. There's a maturation process that is just natural, that takes its own time and its own path, and we can't always hurry that along. But it does. I mean, I definitely have seen that influence. Oh, the more I've stayed in this work, because before this I worked in Illinois for the Illinois Attorney General. I led the Crime Victim Services division there, and so we
Mm.
saw a lot of, and I think my sensitivity to it, like you said, over time has increased my kind of, lack of chill. But I'm trying to, because it's a self-care thing too, right? Because if we're
Yes.
worked up, we're hearing these stories, then we're parenting, and we have that same kind of intensity. That's not good and beneficial. And I don't want to be in a space of always being in overwhelm, based on everything that I'm hearing and doing. So I am really trying to learn how to just like breathe and kind of be more in the moment, and just really kind of just do and be surrounded by more things that bring me joy and light and laughter. And but it's an intentionality that you have to bring to it. I find that it doesn't just automatically come, that you really do have to work at it, which seems a little bit counterintuitive, but I think you really do.
Yeah, that's the challenge of getting knowing a lot of information on
Hmm.
any subject matter.
Yeah,
Like
that's true.
that information now is the lens in which you're filtering things through. And that's the part where it's like you gotta, yeah, that information is great, but it's not good for every situation. It shouldn't be the lens of everything and how I'm navigating my life as a wife, a mother, a friend. It's like, it's like, when do you put that hat on? When do you take it off? And just be present with the people that you love and you care about. And that's speaking to that space where you're talking about, like, if we're constantly revved up on this issue, and we don't have our process for stepping away, then it could become uh, a bit toxic for our own personal well-being, because we're not releasing it. It's like being able to pick it up and put it down, pick it up and put it down. And that doesn't mean that we're not holding space for the people or the issues that matter to us. It's that we have put a regulator in place so that we can make sure that we are taking care of ourselves in the process as well.
Yeah, that is so important, that picking it up and putting it down. And even like with like the start of work, and I work fully remotely, and being able to have those boundaries about, okay, I'm not gonna wake up first thing in the
Mm-hmm.
morning and get on the email. I'm not gonna late in the night and just really quickly answer this. And I think that's all a part of creating space, like you said, and creating time to, put it down and leave it down and then pick it up again. But like really having those boundaries set is so, so important.
From a career perspective, when you think about that, like, especially now where there is a flexibility of people being able to work from anywhere at any point in time, and also looking at the ability to advance your career, to be seen as a star team player, or always a team player. How do you keep yourself from operating in that space where you're constantly accessible and you're not creating those boundaries for yourself, where there's time to work and there's time to play and there's time to do absolutely whatever you want to do? Like, how do you do that with the remote work?
Yeah, it's really an interesting challenge with remote work when you have a job that you really care about, right? I think for me,
Mm-hmm.
when you have a job that you're kind of like, whatever, it's just a job, you don't really care about it, I feel like it's a little bit easier to put it down. You're like, okay, this is my work time, and then I'm going to be done. But when you really care and enjoy what you do, it's harder, I think. And so I find myself, and I work in a situation where I live on the West Coast. So, but my company is mostly operates on Central Time hours. So I'm always up really a lot earlier for where I live compared to everyone else. So theoretically I could work kind of longer, right? I get up early and I can just keep working. And so what a normal end day is for me versus what like the Central Time end day is, right? So I think for me, I've really tried to just honestly, sometimes I have to tell myself out loud, as time I have to say, Sharisse, it is 5 o'clock in the morning. You do not have to answer that email. They can wait until 7 a.m. your time when it's 9 o'clock when it's supposed to start, right? Even because I'm up early. So literally, sometimes I have to
Mm-hmm.
say, I have to stop myself. And I'm like, you know what? We're not going to answer that right now. They can wait. Or on a Sunday, if it's not urgent, I'm not going to respond to that right now. Like I have to kind of like will myself to say, this isn't the time I'm doing X, Y, Z. Even if I'm not doing anything, still it's like, okay, that's not a good boundary. So I really have to kind
Mm-hmm.
of really work at it because it can just bleed into all days, all times, all hours when you're working, remotely. And I think too, having not having the teammates, like you don't see people. I didn't meet everybody on my team. I'd been there like almost a whole year before we were all there together because we'd have meetings, we'd get together, but then somebody was sick, somebody was out maternity leave, different things. So even that kind of being a team player, it's hard to do. You have to do that electronically. So that's also the challenge of you have to like jump on the teams and leave a chat and do those things, which
Mm-hmm.
take up more time on technology than maybe you would if you were in an office. You could just walk down the hall and say something. So I think the tendency or the temptation to be more accessible, because that's the only way people have access to you. Like the only way people can see you is when you're, on the Teams or online, they see the green dot or whatever. So I think it requires even more discipline to like, no, I'm not right now. And really, and just be okay with it within yourself, right? That people can still email. Like, I don't care if people email me early, but just know I'm going to make a decision. I'm not going to answer emails before a certain hour, right? Or not going to answer them after a certain hour. So I think just kind of having those decisions made and sticking to them, I think is really important, especially in the remote workspace. And then also having those decisions made before, like, it really gets tested, I think is important. Like, especially when my kids were smaller, it was really important. For me, the priority was my kids came first, period. So if there was something that I had to do or take a call, that's just what I did. And so if there was ever a time when they did, like, I made up that decision before they ever called, before they even were able to call, right? So then once they got in an age where they could call, then when they did, I just knew, well, that was the priority. Or, a trip, if I couldn't do it with them, then I couldn't do it with them. Like, so, it helped to make those decisions in advance. So kind of setting the standard, okay, I'm not answering the phone before, 7 a.m., then it's easier to stick to it. Then so when someone texts, I don't feel as tempted. But it took somebody to text first or email me first, then I had to make for me to have it like realize, oh, this is a thing I should probably like figure out. So it's hard though. There's pluses and minuses to remote work, but mostly pluses for me, but I know it's hard. It's not for everybody.
Yeah, one of the things that I do is, so if I'm working after hours or late into the evening, you won't know it. I may respond to your email, but I schedule it to go out in the morning. Because I think it's important for people to understand, and people get the understanding by how we're communicating. If they see me emailing at 11 o'clock at night, or, in the wee hours of the morning, then they know, oh, I can send her an email and I have an expectation to hear back from her. But because I put that in place for myself, even sometimes with my husband, he'll be like, did you see such and such email? I say, yes, I did. But I'm not, ain't no email coming from me tonight at 8 o'clock at night. And that's challenging for him because he's the complete opposite. He'll call at 5 in the morning, all kinds of crazy stuff, where I'm like, no, people treat you how you teach them to treat you. Yes. And so I have a responsibility to put up my guardrails, to put up my gates and all the other things necessary so that I set the standard on how people will engage with me when we are conducting business.
That is 100% true. I think in business and in life, people treat you how you allow them to on some level. And I know, and a lot of us, it's a process and it's a growth curve where we're learning how to set those boundaries and hold those guardrails. And I think it does take a measure of maturity and experience to understand that and to experience what happens, when people treat you the way that you've taught them to, right? And then you're like, oh, wait, I don't like that, but let's look back and see how I have kind of given them tacit permission to do it because that's how I allowed. Like you said, and if you send an email, people are like, oh, she's up, I'll just send her. Or like calling. Like I've trained people, like I go to bed really early, so people know not to call me late because I'm not going to answer the phone. But if I kind of kept answering the phone, even though people even like socially would call me late, then I didn't still give them the permission to call me. And I'm getting disturbed. So now people know don't call me late because I'm asleep, and so they don't. Or I just leave it on do not disturb, and they don't. Here, I'll catch up with you the next day. And same thing with texting. But definitely, it's so important to understand that it's your responsibility to hold your boundaries and to hold your guardrails to protect your peace and to protect your joy and to protect your own well-being.
So what's early? You said you go to bed early. What's early?
I don't want to tell on myself. One of my friends is like, one of my friends was like, you have a middle school bedtime. I'm like, no. Okay, but so I will go to bed. So I would say the latest is 9 because I'm up at like 5. So 9 o'clock, if I'm generally, but I'll like, if I'm doing something or go out and have an event, I certainly can stay up later. But my general is 9. It's early for a grown up. For a grown up. But if
So
there's a
I
good
can't.
reason, if there's a good reason, Tommy, then I'll stay up later. But generally, 9 o'clock, I'm out.
Okay. I can't even if I go to bed at 10:45 p.m., I'm going to pop up at 2:33 in the morning and will not be able to go back to sleep. So my bedtime is 11 p.m.
Oh my gosh, all the time?
All it is I can't even explain it and Troy,
Oh
so
my
you go to
gosh.
bed at 9, Troy's in the bed at 7:30. And I'm like, "Listen, grandpa, I'm not getting into bed at
7:30.
7:30
So
under
see, I'm
no
not that bad.
circumstances."
That is funny.
So, but it's like my body clock. And
Hmm.
when I was, really learning of myself and really understanding my body and all those different things, that's something I learned about myself. And so 11 o'clock, I get in the bed and I wake up at 6:30 in the morning without an alarm clock. But if I go to bed anytime earlier than 11 p.m., like clockwork, I pop up. And once I wake up, I cannot go back to
Yeah.
sleep.
Yeah. I have that where if I wake up, I can't go back to sleep. But my sleep pattern has changed a little bit as, times of life and a woman's life change, bring about such changes. But generally, like I don't use an alarm clock. I'm usually up between, 5 and 5:30 most days. But if I can go to bed at 11 like one night, but like consistently, I'd be a wreck. And then the next day, I'd have to probably take a nap because I'd be so tired.
Oh.
But from staying up late, so I gotta take a nap. Gotta take a little power nap so I can make it through the day. So that
Now,
is so
let me
funny.
defend my grandpop's bedtime, Troy. So he goes to bed that early, but he also gets up at 4:30.
Okay. So see?
So, I'm like in context when you think about the hours that someone is
Yeah.
sleeping when they go to bed early, like yourself, you're going to
Hmm.
bed at 9, but you're getting up so early.
Yeah.
That is like a full night's sleep.
Hmm.
In order, a good amount of solid, healthy hours of sleeping, I should say.
Right.
So, to Grandpop's defense, in case he listens to this.
Like you're good. You're getting your
Yeah.
rest. Good. Yes, and sleep is so important too. It's like a self-care. I mean, like I've always been a person that was really like protective of my rest and my sleep because it is a really without even knowing all the whys, like you said, getting to know about yourself and know your body and everything. Like it's really important, like for well-being, to have like proper rest, right, and to have sleep. And not having sleep deprivation is really, um, can have different effects, at different levels of different people. But for me, not getting enough rest is really like a big deal. I can really feel it in my emotions and
Mm-hmm.
my behavior and my appetite, all the things. So I really try to really protect my rest too.
Mm-hmm. So before we go into our next segment, knowing what you know now,
Mm.
what would you share with younger Sharisse about this journey she's about to embark on?
Whew, that's a good question. I think one of the things that I would say to her is that everything is going to be okay. I think that you're going to be okay. You're going to make it. You're going to get through these things that life is going to, present to you. And I think I would also say to her is to be true to yourself. I think I've spent a lot of my journey trying to be, we talked about the beginning. I wrote that book when I was 7. And I spent a lot of my journey not really owning the parts of me and that little girl who was able to create a book of poetry at the age of 7. And so I've been a lot of I don't really talk about it that much. It's interesting you brought it up. Almost never do I talk about it. And I think just really being true to myself, that creative part of myself, that very sensitive part of myself that kind of enables and gives room for that creativity. I would tell little Sharice to embrace that part of yourself and that there's nothing wrong with you. And this is how God created you. And there's
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of goodness ahead for you if you just stay true to yourself and keep going. And you can do it, like that you're enough as you are, as you were made. And I think I struggled a lot. And I think through relationships and through my career, to try to be someone other than who I really truly was. Um, and so I think that's the message I would tell. Because I think you would have, I think, then to your point, like you get to this place and um, all those experiences shaped me to who I am today. But I think having a stronger sense of myself and integrity, with internal integrity, being true to who I was. That's what I would try to pass on to her, tell her now.
So our next segment is I'm bringing her to the table with me. And this is your opportunity to give another woman her virtual flowers, for you would not be where you are today
Mhm.
without her fingerprint on your life.
So when I think about that question, and I think about the many women that have touched my life in different times over my life, one woman in particular is standing out and coming forward for me right now, and her name is Brenda Salter McNeil, Reverend Dr. Brenda Salter McNeil, and she is a woman who is um, she's a theologian. She is a professor. She's a preacher, my favorite preacher, teacher, minister of all time. And she is someone who I admired from afar for many years when I was younger. And then our paths have intersected where we've had the opportunity to work together. And I've been able to support her in some of her writing. She's written a lot of books. And she is someone who has always kind of seen in me and called forth in me things I don't always see about myself, and always really been encouraging of me. And it's always been for me a real witness of how I am regarded. Um, I always say, I feel like I know God was really thinking highly of me if He's given you to me as a mentor. That's really how I feel about her, is that she's such a special woman, and how she operates with excellence and grace and intelligence and dignity, and that she has entrusted me to kind of partner with her on different projects and do different things. And then we've developed a personal relationship. I just always feel really like super honored. Like there's people that you feel like, wow, they've chosen me to be their friend, or they've chosen me to work with. And that's how I really feel about her. And she's always kind of encouraged me in those parts of myself that I've felt not as secure, like especially in the areas of my
Mm-hmm.
writing, my creativity. She's always really like encouraged me in that in a way that's been very tangible and not just through words. And so that's really helped me to just continue on my journey overall, and given me that wind beneath my wings just to go forward in a lot of different ways. So I think that would be the person who I would bring. Give her her virtual flowers at the table.
Yes, I love it. So, our final segment of our conversation is Food is Love. And
Hmm.
I'm going to ask you a series of food questions. Food is near and dear to my heart.
Yes.
So, this is actually my favorite segment. What food best describes your personality and why?
So I thought a lot about this question, and I think this was the question. The food I think that best describes my personality is going to be a molten chocolate lava cake,
Mm.
because I think for me, I always like to tell people, or I tease people, that I'm more than what meets the eye. Like people think I'm one way, but as they get to know me, and they get deeper inside, like they cut open the chocolate cake, there's more goodness that comes out, and there's more um, like warmth and sensitivity, and that comes out. And it's on the outside. On the exterior, I may appear to be, a more kind of calm and reserved and kind of distant person, and I'm not those things really inside, like all this, but you have to get in there to see all that stuff. So that's why I would. And also chocolate is my chocolate cake is my favorite, so that's also, it like goes well together. So
Can you name a time in your life when food was healing for you? And when I say food was healing for you, not talking about a specific diet, but
mhm.
like where there was a moment in your life where the comfort and the warmth and the nurturing aspect of food was healing for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I a couple of years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, had a major surgery, and I am single at that time, and I remember, it was after surgery, you can't really eat, but they tell you to start eating so you can start. So I was kind of like, I don't really want to eat anything, and someone, a girlfriend, brought over to me and dropped it like at my door some matzo ball soup, and I've never had matzo ball soup before, which is incredible to me as like a fully grown person. And I tell you, Tommy, that was like the best soup I'd ever had in my life. I was like, that was just the perfect thing. I felt so like comforted and like loved in that moment. And the woman, I'll say her name
Mm-hmm.
too, Susie Lair, brought it to me. without asking me. And then also brought like flowers and other things, fun things too. But that soup was just like, oh my gosh, it's the best thing ever. Why have I not had it before? And it just really was exactly what I needed to feel. Like it gave me the exact amount of nourishment, like the spiritual nourishment, the physical nourishment that I needed in that moment. And I think also because she brought it to me, and didn't ask like, what do you need? What can I bring? She just brought it. And that really meant a lot to me too. So I think it was as much in the delivery as in the food itself, but that was like the best thing ever.
That was that love transaction. You knew Susie cared in that moment when she did that for you. So I totally get that. Does your family have an heirloom recipe that is passed down from generation to generation?
Sadly, we do not. My grandmother was a phenomenal cook, like phenomenal. And we did get her to write down a lot of her recipes. However, Tommy, I looked at those recipes and all those steps and some of those recipes, and I was like, oh, I will never be making yeast rolls like that require overnight and 26 new. And there's a chocolate cake recipe that she had, which is my favorite chocolate cake of life. Like she used to send this cake to me when I was in college. She was in Nashville, Tennessee. She would bake me a chocolate cake for my birthday and send it in the mail to me to California every year. But tell me, have I ever made the cake? No, because I have the recipe for it. But I just can't. I do like to cook, but I'm not a baker like that. So we have the recipes. So technically they have been passed down. However, nobody in my generation or then now, my kids' generation, they don't make it. But it's like we have them. So somebody could take that on. But sadly we don't. But they are really like wonderful, delicious things. But like no one's really sadly taking them on. But we have them.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. Yes. So quickly before we end our conversation, now I know that you're not living in Chicago right now, but you have spent some time in Chicago.
Yes.
So these are some this or that questions regarding things specific to food specific to Chicago.
Okay.
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 So deep dish or thin crust?
This is the non-Chicago answer, but it's thin crust for me. People in Chicago be like, what? Yeah. Thin crust.
So a city style hot dog or a street style hot dog?
You said a city style or a street style?
Mm-hmm.
I would say city style.
So for your tacos, al pastor or a carne asada?
Carne asada.
Garrett's mix, the caramel and cheese or the cheese corn?
Oh, I like just the plain caramel, which is also not the Chicago people would say the mix, but I like just the plain caramel. But Chicago people would say the mix is what you have to do.
Okay, a couple of sports in here. The Cubs or the White Sox?
I used to always say, living all those years in Chicago, that I was baseball agnostic because that is such a divisive thing. So I will stick with my answer that I am baseball agnostic in Chicago.
The Bears or the Bulls?
I guess I would say the Bears.
Are you a sports fan?
No, not really. Not really, Tommy. I'm a sports fan by default because of my kids. I have two sons, and so they've been sports fans. So they both right now they both really like the Bears. So I think they like the Bulls too, though. And there's so much Bulls tradition in Chicago with like Michael Jordan, Rose, and all that stuff. So I'm not answering these Chicago questions very well because I'm not from there originally. But I lived there for a long time, so I'm kind of like.
But Sharisse, I'm so grateful that you took time to come and stay a while with me today and join me for conversation. And just know that you are welcome at my table anytime.
Thank you so much, Tommy. This has been so much fun. I've been enjoying being at your table. So it's been wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. I hope you felt the love and connection in today's conversation. Every woman you heard from has faced the impossible and emerged stronger. This is your personal invitation to stay a while longer at TommyV.com. That's TOMMIV.com for more inspiration for your mind, body, and soul. And let's not forget your belly. You're always welcome at my table. Please be sure to subscribe, make yourself at home, and stay a while.